Hi, and welcome to Introduction to Shading. I've been asked by one of my patrons, Jory, to talk about shading. That's something that I've actually avoided for quite a bit, mostly because I think that it gets in the way a lot of the times. People think that drawing is shading, where it actually is not. There's a little bit more to it than just putting gray on something. And that's actually one of the reasons I'm going to be talking about this, and I'm going to break it down so that you could understand it and wrap your head around why it's probably not necessarily a good idea to just go right away into shading. Hi, my name is Luis Escobar. I'm a storyboard artist on the Simpsons television show. I've been working on the show for over 20 years. So before I begin, let's define what shading is. Shading is the delineation of what is in light and what is in shadow. In other words, when you see an object, there are basically two sides to that object when it has to do with light. The area, the side that is exposed to light, and the area that is not exposed to light. And that's really the whole point of shading is to clearly define what is in light and what is in shadow. That's it. That's all that shading is. So to this end, let's begin. Now, one of the first things that I would recommend is to limit your values to 4. And it's because there's so many gradations of light. There's so many values when light transitions into dark that it can become overwhelming. But if you limit yourself to only 4 values, then it's so much easier to be able to deal with all that you see. So these are the values that I recommend limiting yourself to: white, light gray, dark gray, and black. That's it. Now, I will say that dark gray and black more often than not are shadow values. Okay, so and then this group here of the light gray and white are the light. Okay, so anything in light is going to be either white or gray, and anything in dark will be dark gray and black. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about are edges. Now, edges are the type of transition between light and dark. Not all the transitions between light and dark are the same. And the types of edges define the type of object that it is and the way that the light transfers into dark. There are 4 types of edges. There's soft, firm, hard, and lost. Soft edges is the type of edges most people think when they're talking about rendering. It's used to define gradual transitions of light to dark in a very round object. So basically what I'm saying here is that a soft edge is, say you've got something soft like a cylinder or a ball. And a soft transition is a very gradual transition. Do you see? Like that. Very soft. It's usually like what we think about when we're talking about shading. People think about this as shading. Oh, very soft. Okay? And it comes from very round objects like this. Okay? So that's what a soft edge is. A firm edge is just as common as a soft edge and are commonly found in organic things. Using them instantly makes your work look more professional. These edges are used when defining the transition of soft, short corners. And what I mean by this is that unlike soft edges, firm edges come in more. If you're for example, you have a sharper corner, a soft but sharp corner. So let's say that this is a boxy kind of an object. Okay, it's not a box because it's got these soft corners over here. And then when you shade it, it's got a firm edge. This is a firm edge. It's not as soft a transition as a soft edge. It is a little bit, just a touch more abrupt. Okay? The next type is a hard edge. Our hard edges are found in less organic materials or in some types of cast shadows. They define the abrupt change between light and dark. So, an example of this would be a boxy edge. And then we just got this. Boom. Here, let me just make sure that this is clear. So that's it. So let me actually take this line away just to make it even clearer. That is a hard edge. It just, boom, it just cuts. It's basically a line that delineates dark from light. It is also, when you're doing a cast shadow, it works as a cast shadow as well. So let's say that in some types of cast shadows, not every type of cast shadow, but say that there's a cast shadow of this ball here, and you could literally draw a line and color it in because that's a hard edge. It just abruptly ends. Okay? So this is a hard edge and this is a hard edge. Now, lost edges. Lost edges are often artistic, but are found when a subject and background tones blend into one another, causing the viewer to not know where the subject ends or the background begins. Also, even within its own subject, say you're drawing a person and you draw a lost edge in between the arm and the torso or whatever. The whole point is that you've got some kind of object like this ball, and say that the background is equally dark. Is equally as dark as the ball. This area here is a lost edge. You can't see where the edges begin and end. It's lost. So the viewer gets to fill in the blank. They see the dark and the light, and then they see this transition, and then you lose this area, but then the viewer tends to fill in the blank themselves. Okay, so that's a lost edge. So now that's what we've got. We've got soft edges. We've got soft edges here. We've got lost edges here. We've got firm edges, hard edge. All right. So these are the kinds of edges that were always in just about in every object that we see and we're drawing from. These are the edges we're working with. I'm just going to give some quick tips on helping you shade. Clearly define where the light ends and the light begins for yourself. So whenever you're going to shade anything, it is very helpful for you to make sure that you define for yourself in some way where the transition of light happens. Okay, so I'm drawing these objects here. Okay, and we want to make sure that we put in the shadows where we want the shadows to be. It'll be helpful right away when you're looking at your subject to find where the light ends. So let's say the light will end here. Let's say in this one the light will end here. And in this one the light will end, let's make it over here like that. So from now on, anything on this area right here is light. Anything in this area is light. Anything in this area is light. Anything in this area here is dark. This area here is dark, and anything in this area here is dark. That's the reason why you should just clearly for yourself demark where the light transition happens. That way, all you even have to do, you don't even have to be fancy or anything. All you have to do is make sure that this part's going to be dark. This part's going to be dark. This part's going to be dark. Okay? So we already have a very clear definition. It's not a pretty definition because there is no edges defined, which brings us to point number 2, define the edges. Okay, so now that we've got these objects, all of these objects tend to be soft. If I was to, let me change this object so that I could at least have a firm edge drawn. So this is a little bit more boxy. And the reason I say this is a little bit more boxy is because this is the type of shape that you would get, say, in the forearm, on the knees. There's little soft boxes for knees. The human body has a lot of kind of soft boxy areas. They're not hard. They're usually not hard edges. They're often very firm-edged areas where the bone and the surface of the body meet is often very sharp and cornery, but soft. So you get a lot of firm edges in the human body. Okay, so we've got 2 soft edges and 1 firm. Now that we've defined the edge, this is where we can begin really shading. And so I'll define, this is going to be soft. This is for myself. This will be soft here. This will be soft. And this will be firm. Okay. Be aware of bounce light. A good rule of thumb is to tone the transition area darker than the rest of the shadow area. All right, so this is my next tip. When we have this transition area that we've defined ourselves is probably going to be a little bit darker than the rest of the shadow area. The reason why we're doing this is because there's this thing called bounce light. Bounce light is light that bounces from whatever surface your object is or is next to, and it bounces into the shadow, adding a touch of light into the shadow, which means that the corner where the light and shadow meet gets the least amount of bounce light. It's going to be the darkest area of an object. Just by doing this, you could leave the shade here as sloppy as I have. Just by adding a darker edge on the transition area, you're going to get a very good looking bit of shadow. just making it a little bit darker than the rest of the shadow. This is soft, so this is also soft here. And this is a firm edge, so this is just straight down. This should be softer. Okay. Uh, one of the uh, one of the things that I highly recommend, and this is another rule of thumb here. I'll make this a little darker. One of the things I recommend here, and this is my last tip, do not use light values in the shadow areas. Do not use dark values in the light, and do not use dark values in the light areas. So we're coming back to this. Remember how we broke this down into chunks? This being the shadow and this being the light area, the area in light. Never use anything in this chunk if this is your light area value, dark area values in the light area. And never use anything as light as a light gray if it's in the light area into your dark areas. So what this means is that the darkest area in the light should not be dark gray. It should stay light gray. It should never go into the dark gray should never go into the light. Now, once in the dark area, then that's where our dark gray is. That's where it lives. We define the dark area with dark gray. And then the core shadow is darker than that even, like it could be black. But generally, the light never gets that dark. This should always be darker than anything in the light. In fact, let me soften and lighten up some of this area so it could be light gray and not be dark gray. And this area basically doesn't have any dark in it. This doesn't have any gray at all. So we're pretty safe here. And now we could actually add a few hard edges for the shadows, for the cast shadow. The variation of the edges that you give your drawing creates interest and makes your shading look that much more dynamic and interesting. If everything is shaded the same, if everything has the same edge, if everything is soft, it doesn't it gives a less defined, refined look. What you want to do is to observe objects and see where you could vary the edges, where you can make things into soft edges, firm edges, hard edges, etc. So I hope this is clear and it makes sense. And it is a good introduction to what shading is all about and what and why it's important to understand the types of forms that you're going to be shading because you want to know what kind of edges you're going to give it. Okay, so let me just really quickly review what we went over. Shading is the delineation of what is in light and what is in shadow. So limit your values to white, light gray, dark gray, and black. And there are 4 types of edges. And the 4 types are soft, firm, hard, and lost, which are basically this. And when shading, you may want to clearly define where the light ends and the light begins for yourself by actually literally drawing the transition area on your drawing very lightly so that you know exactly where the delineation happens or occurs. Then you define your edges and be aware of bounce light. So it's a good rule of thumb. A good rule of thumb is to tone the transition area, the part where you put the line, your little transition area. You should tone it darker than the rest of the shadow area, because that way you instantly get an instant bounce light, which is this. So it should be darker. The area where you put the line, it should be a little bit darker than this general shaded area, which is generally dark gray. And do not use light values in the shadow area, and do not use dark values in your light area. So again, if these are going to be in your light area, they do not go into your dark, and none of your dark tones should ever be in the light area. So these 2 chunks shouldn't cross over. So I hope that was clear and it makes sense to you. If you found value in this video, I would really appreciate it if you returned value for value by going to Patreon and becoming one of my patrons. The link is here in the corner here. One of the perks of becoming a patron is for $1 a month that you get early access to all the videos I produce, often months before anybody else gets to see it. And also, when you ask me a question, patrons get first dibs. I answer questions from anybody, whether it's from YouTube or my websites or wherever people ask me questions about drawing. And I answer them as best as I can, often via video. However, when my patrons ask me for a question, I tackle their questions first. I put their videos there first. And they get to see the videos right away, while everybody else has to wait a few months maybe to actually see the video. So I encourage you to become a patron. If only for $1 a month, you just get that very basic benefit. So thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. All right, bye.